What's up, Wolfpack? Welcome to another episode of the Adaptive Alphas podcast. Today I have a special guest for you guys. Before I introduce the guest, I want to start this episode with wishing everybody a happy new year. Happy 2023. I hope you guys are smashing your goals out there. I hope you guys are getting after it and chasing your dreams and failing forward and challenging yourselves in whatever capacity that is. I wish a lot of pain. I wish that you endure a lot of challenges, because with that comes growth, whether that's inadvertent or whether that's conscious, it's going to happen. So let's jump into today's episode. I have a multi-dimensional entrepreneurial individual. He's the founder of Cacao Breath, and he's also a breathwork facilitator. That's originally how I found out about him. He's here local. My older brother actually is a big supporter of Nico. It's really impacted him in a positive way. That's how we originally met. So Nico Miyatake.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for taking the time out on such a short notice to come out on the podcast. How are you doing, man?
Yeah, I'm stoked to be here, man. I'm doing great. And yeah, it's cool because originally I hired you as a business coach, and that was when I was first getting started. And just seeing everything you do really inspired me. And I'm jazzed to be here, man.
The first thing that you and I talked about was really diving into purpose.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah. Yeah, you had taken me through a process that was the soul's values or core values, and discovering your soul's compass. And that was big because it was in a new version of an internal alignment that really helped point me in a direction that made sense for me as an individual.
Yeah, and I think also when I'm thinking about the community and the people that listen and tune into the podcast, I think they know they do why they do what they do. But when you really dive in, you're like, okay, what are your values? What principles do you have? What system are you predicating every decision moving forward, right? Like what helps you grow, what helps you advance, what keeps you motivated. Can dial in and get super clear on those things. And so, in those times where you don't feel as motivated to get up in the morning and do what you're supposed to do, you remember, oh, it's deeper than just something superficial. It's literally like my soul's calling type of thing. So going back to that moment, I remember you got very emotional when we were doing some of that process. You're not generally like that, right? Like you're generally the person that's facilitating this emotional expressions and like people release and really come to center, right?
Yeah, it was just so nice to be led. In the events that I lead, I'm the one doing that. And I usually am very picky about, I don't go to other people's events because I'm sure we'll talk about why later. But yeah, it was just nice to just be led for a little bit and feel like the quality of the container and stuff like that. So
yeah, that's awesome. And so let's talk about early years. What do you want to share as early context for them to get to know you a little bit better?
I was born in Japan, lived there for about 3 years. Grew up Mormon. Parents divorced when I was about 10. I lived with my mom. My mom stopped going to church when my parents got divorced, and so I stopped going. I grew up without a male role model in my life. My dad was just working, and we were divorced, and my mom kind of shared with me her opinions about my dad, which really shaped my young mind. And so I think it's just been recently in these last few years that I've come to have formed my own clear opinion and see my dad for who he is. So that was huge. But I grew up, as a teenager, I spent a lot of time BMXing, snowboarding, longboarding with friends, like getting outside. I was kind of an adrenaline junkie. Okay. I was pretty athletic, still am. And I was always fascinated and deeply incurious about the unseen world, the unseen realms, and like, right, we call that spirituality or esoteric or whatever. And
not to derail you, just because I'm getting a little bit of more nuance. Would you say that doing BMXing, snowboarding, these different the sports that allowed you to really challenge yourself, do hard things, right? Like I think I've seen some clips of you online where you're a pretty good snowboarder. So would you say that's helped you really discover who you are? Like, was that part and parcel of a self-discovery journey doing those sports?
Um, Maybe. I've never thought about that, to be honest with you. But what I love about it is back then I was very competitive and I always pushed myself. So I was always on this edge, like when for me at least when I'm writing, it's like, oh, I can be comfortable and I have developed a certain level of skill. And then there's the edge where you're like pushing yourself a little bit. And I just love that because it brings you into the present moment. So I mean, if you're not, you're gonna crash, you're gonna break a bone or something. So I'm sure that there's some crossover between those things. Now that you say that,
And without a father figure, right? Is that that's fair to say, right? Without a father figure, did you have mentors growing up? Did you have people who you wanted to emulate, or men, or strong presence, or the strong masculine?
yeah. So uh, I'll first say that in seventh and eighth grade. I was very depressed, and I missed like more than half of the school years in junior high. And my mom tried to bring some guys around to like help me, and I was just like, "Screw you, dude!" Like, nice try.
That's right.
And then I met I got into Reiki when I was like 17 or 18. Reiki's a energy healing modality, and then through that I met a shaman who I at that time considered to be a type of like spiritual father or whatever. And I was just very young, but he was a mentor. He was someone I wanted to emulate. And he was very much, I mean, he was a self-proclaimed shaman, but he was very interesting because he actually ended up creating, and from my opinion, what we see today is the ceremonial cacao trend. And he's actually trained indigenous shamans who are native and kind of reintroduced cacao to them and now they're doing work with cacao as a plant medicine partner and heart opening medicine. So
And you said you were in your teens when you met
I
the
was in my
shaman?
teens. I was 18. Yeah.
And that's a really interesting and fascinating story that I would love for you to share with the audience if you're open to it.
This was in Guatemala. Yeah. I'd love to share. So yeah, I met him when I was 18. I worked with him on a monthly basis for about a year, maybe 2 years, and just doing online Skype sessions, cacao ceremonies. And his work was with the help of cacao, which can be a great aid for meditation and inner work and intuitive processing. You go inside, you take the inner journey, you look at yourself, and a lot of it is very based on feeling and intuition and internal visions, and the idea that all of our thoughts and feelings are in one form or another a manifestation from our subconscious and unconscious. And so working with these things that bubble up as signposts or signals or internal messages, and in the same way using reality as a feedback system to learn about yourself. It's like if you have an emotional charge towards something, it's like, oh, you can like take it inside and ask yourself why. And to me, as I've grown older, that's well, so to continue, so he um and I Lake Atitlan, Guatemala was where I studied with him for 6 months. And this was a crucial time period for me. I was 21. I was like going to college. I wanted to be a naturopathic doctor or a chiropractor. So I was doing studies for that. I was working at Powder Mountain. I was snowboarding as much as I could. And he made me an offer one day. He was, I guess he thought enough of me. He was like, why don't you be my scholarship student and you can come down here and study the human energy field? And I was just like what? Like everything in me just like jumped, and I was just like, yeah, I'll do it. So I dropped out of college. I broke up with my girlfriend. I quit my job, and I just got a one-way ticket down there. While I was down there, he was running 3 ceremonies a week. We were in, ceremony was like 4 to 6 hours, three times a week. And then the other half of the week, I was apprenticing with an acupuncturist who was running a free mobile health clinic in rural parts of Guatemala where basically healthcare didn't exist. So we were using acupuncture, massage, and Reiki to treat people. And that was just so eye-opening, because you go out into these rural places where they're basically just working the land, and like they work all day, they work so hard, and you see they have all these gnarly health conditions, and it's just like, and they don't have anyone to help them with it. And so I got steeped in that for 6 months. I was doing my inner work, and then I was like in service to these people the other part of the week. And it really just opened me up. And I won't say that like the whole thing, like, blessings come in a lot of different forms. I think part of the blessings of that was being exposed to misbeliefs and being indoctrinated, and just picking up a new ideology and running with it, and learning to, in retrospect, unpacking all of that and going like, okay, I kind of, like, I used to be Mormon, but maybe I just picked up a whole nother ideology, and to really see that it's just the same thing in a different form, but maybe just more individualized to me. But yeah, so I spent 6 months doing that.
So how did you guys originally meet?
Yeah, so he was touring through SLC at the time, and someone in the Reiki group was like, there's this shaman that's in town, and he does cacao ceremonies. Do you guys want to do it? And so,
Does he introduce himself as shaman, or is that more of some like edification from other people?
that's a good question. I think Keith wouldn't introduce himself as that. He's an interesting dude. He spent most of his life splunking and rock climbing, and he claims to have invented some of the gear that climbers use today. He just came up with the ideas, invented it, and gave the patents to his friends. Okay. So he's, in my eyes, very forward thinking and ahead of his time, and is very much a pioneer of consciousness, I think, too, because I've been integrating the stuff he said for till now. I mean, I'm still integrating. It's been 10 years,
It's wild. And that's real.
Yeah.
When you're saying that.
Yeah.
And like the integration phase from one ceremony, one plant medicine journey, one session, even breath work. You're like 2 years later, whoa. Yeah. So anyways, keep going.
Yeah. So, yeah, I spent 6 months with him, but in total, I worked with him for about 4 years. And then I came back after that. I came back to the States, and I was just like, I didn't know what to do, because I just basically got blasted open, is what it felt like. I didn't have a community to come back to. I didn't really fully understand what I had just gone through, having experienced such a out of the box way of life, I guess.
And in that like overall 4-year time frame, do you have any experiences that you want to share that were just like super, like altered state, like that you just...
There was one time I was on his porch, and we just cacao.
Was this in Guatemala?
This was in Guatemala, okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And his porch is very much kind of a group therapy setting, and he has, as people are processing through their stuff, he would often have other people help facilitate so that they could be validated or seen in their gifts or whatever. So anyways, there was one time where I just felt, the only way I could explain it was that like my nervous system was shedding, and that I was letting go of a lot of beliefs. And so like on a very physical level, I was just shaking, and my nervous system felt like it was just lit up. Like if I was, it's as if for 5 or 10 minutes, a higher voltage was running through me. And that was, I just, one of the things he would always say was like, this isn't for your rational mind to understand. And so I just was like, okay, like I'm feeling this. I don't know what the hell I'm feeling. And another experience I'll say too is after that, I was actually living in Iceland at this time. I was doing cacao retreats and ceremonies over there with someone, and I was going to bed, and the energy was just like really, really high somehow. And I felt this electricity run through my spine, and it was two stage. There was two stages of it. The first one, it was so strong that if I moved, I felt like I was gonna explode or like blow up or something, and I was uncontrollably laughing, and it was like kind of scary because I couldn't stop laughing. And then it happened again, and the energy was like even stronger, and again, like no explanation. Like I woke up and I was fine. I did feel like my senses were somehow heightened and increased, and like I could just uh impact, like I could really feel someone else, which was something I had to cope with because being too empathic is both a blessing and a curse. So those two experiences were definitely very out of the box and not explained.
What do you mean by being too empathic is a blessing and a curse?
Because if you're too empathic, you can feel someone else, and um, you lose touch with yourself. So it makes it really easy to self-sabotage. And to unpack it a little more, it's like if you're an empath and you don't know it, you'll walk around most of your life feeling a lot and not knowing that it's not yours. But what happens is like it makes it really easy for you to lose your identity, because if you're constantly processing someone else's emotions, you're not getting in touch with yourself, you know? So you just lose touch.
For any empaths that are listening out there, what would what would your advice, or what have you come to find, like what helps, somebody who is
Trial by fire, man.
Trial by fire.
Honestly, I think that's it, because it eventually, I mean, that's how I learned. If it might not be the case for everyone, but I got myself into a place where I was like processing someone else's, and this is where codependency and like emotional enmeshment and toxic relationships, all that kind of stuff fits in here. You do that, and it becomes like you will process someone else's emotions so that your base needs are met, basically. And it became so painful enough for me that I decided I would make a change.
And so would you say that skill set, does everybody have that ability? Is everybody empathic to a degree? Is there a degree to that ability? Are people desensitized to that ability?
It's a great question. I don't think everyone has it. Like, I don't know, my dad, he's always like, I got a thick skin. And, he's always like water off duck's back. And so maybe he's on the other end of that spectrum. But I think a lot of these people that maybe find themselves in codependent relationships or are emotionally enmeshed with people, I almost guarantee they're highly empathic. And the the solution is actually to become more selfish in a way, so that you can fend for yourself. Because I mean, this has been my path, but it's like you got to learn how to take care of yourself. Like, you don't want to be leaning on someone your whole life,
Provider is one of the core tenets of masculinity, I think, for sure.
Yeah.
Like being able to provide for the tribe, the community, the people around you, whether that's through hunting or through other entrepreneurial means or business means or career orientation.
Yeah.
So one of the values that I share with individuals I work with through this podcast is hunt every day. You got to literally hunt every day. That's something that I found like naturally just feels right. At least when I'm in a really healthy state, like when I'm moving my body every day, eating health conscious, limiting screen time, getting outdoors, like I'm in a space of creative and action orientation and like execution, like moving forward. Right. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, I actually want to speak to the other side of that, or at least my journey, which was like, I think in the new cage community, or even some spiritual communities, there's a misbelief that like life can be easy and that you can kind of float by and that you don't have to work that much. And I totally bought into that when I was a teenager, like that was part of it for me. So and I also was kind of rebelling against that very belief, because I wanted to do it a different way. I wanted to prove the men of the world wrong and like do something else. Right. And yeah, just recently I've come to understand that like that's really what makes me feel like a man is like when I'm providing, when I'm like building shit, when I'm taking care of my own, and yeah, health definitely plays a part in that. And so to speak to the misbelief of how easy it is to adopt misbeliefs from spiritual teachers or gurus. Man, you got to watch out, bro, because I was living in that for like 5 years, and I felt like I was just pissed because I was like, it's not working, you know.
Yeah.
And
Well,
you
you
can't.
said it best, right? New age, new cage.
Yeah.
So good. TM, new age, new cage. And I think, and not to cut you off, but my mind goes to when anyone in any vertical, I feel like when, like, you know, they call it in business, they call it snake oil salesman, right? They sell the create 10 YouTube videos, you'll get 1 million subscribers, and then you'll be financially free for the rest of your life. Get this 5-step book to launch a business and become, you know, a millionaire overnight. Like, it's just the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
And I get there's a marketing piece to it, but to, you know, whether it's ethical or not, or morally, you know, okay, that's a discussion for, I think, on every individual basis. But in general, man, the people that gravitate towards that path of least resistance remind me of children.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I have 2 kids now, and if you were to put my 11-year-old and you were to put junk food in front of her and you were to put a salad in front of her, 9 times out of 10, if nobody's there, she's going to choose the junk food, right? If no one's there to guide her or to help her out and make that decision, she's going to choose that. The path of least resistance is sugar, dopamine, right? Get this instant gratification. And so that's what these, even in the spiritual community, that's what it reminds me of. New age, new cage. It's like, no, you can attract everything. Just, you know, sit in lotus pose and chill and take, you know, do breaths. And I just think that there's so much complexity to everything. Like, is there such thing as too much meditation? And I think it always maps to your end goal, right? What is your end goal? Yeah. But I know when I was the most focused on breath work, meditation, and just centeredness, I was not doing any action. Yeah. And sometimes that's necessary, right? Recalibration, there's different aspects, but sometimes it can become an interesting deterrent on in your overall life path. It's like, just like anything, like too much water can drown you. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so it's like, just because, and this is a newer thought process I've been having, like just because you're doing that every day, maybe the step that you do need to take is that action. Yeah. Maybe that step you need that eustress, that healthy dose of stress.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, meditation's great. I think everyone should meditate for, however, I don't think you need to meditate for more than an hour, you know, but to be able to reap the benefits from meditating, that's important. We were kind of having it talking about this in the context of like, you're not doing anything when you're meditating. And there's something happening inside, which is like I think you're adding to your happiness. You're establishing inner peace within yourself. You're calming your nervous system. You're regulating your nervous system. Super important to know how to do that. But you're right. Like, you're not getting out there in the world when you're meditating, and sometimes you have to do that if you want to get by in this world. So again, like the misbeliefs about that can get installed by, you know, gurus or teachers, it's like you got to decide for yourself. I think that if you continue to take advice from everyone else your entire life, you're never going to find yourself. You're never going to be happy. And there comes a point where just putting in the work, and like, I think it's like the healthy dopamine when you're working an achievement for an end goal, that drives me, you know, like you just complete small tasks throughout the day. Yeah. Boom, like there's your dopamine hit, you know.
Which is earning your dopamine, right? Versus like that instant gratification that we have. Friedrich Nietzsche quote comes in my head, which is, "I wish suffering upon you, I wish pain upon you." And people are like, "That's why the fuck would you say that?" Like, and it's because the rest of that quote is like, it makes you a person worth of value, you know, a person of value. Yeah. And the people that most people look up to in whatever industry or vertical have gone through so much fucking trauma, traumatic situations, life lessons, like gotten punched in the mouth over and over and over. And so you want the success, you want the prestige, you want these certain things, but most people won't get it because they don't realize it's on the other side of that suffering.
Yeah, you can avoid pain. You know, it's the easy way. You can continue to do that. And I'll just say from my personal experience too, like going through a toxic relationship was like a huge catalyst for me. And that type of pain and suffering, like I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for that. Um, and so it is interesting to wish that upon people, you know what I mean? To protect people from that.
Again, I guess it's just unorthodox advice, right? Like the spiritual age, spiritual cage type of advice. It's truisms. When we were having a brief conversation before we started the cameras up, it's truisms that exist whether we like it or not, that we've both found, it seems, on our spiritual paths. And that's another conversation that I want to have, but I don't think I'm going to bring it up in the podcast. But it just briefly, it's everything you do is spiritual.
Yeah.
Spiritual doesn't look or dress a certain way.
Yeah, I've adopted like you eating good food and making sure you're hydrated and getting good sleep is probably one of the most spiritual things you can do, because if you're not taking care of your physical body, you're not going to feel right to show up and do what you need to do during the day. And so that's where all spirituality becomes very practical, and where it makes the most sense is in your daily life. You know, it's not reserved for the retreat. It's not reserved for an event. Those things can help, like light a fire or a spark, but it's not the solution.
Yeah. Well, how'd you come to that?
Like I said, I didn't have much of a father figure or a male figure growing up. And so I was kind of coddled by my mom and my two older sisters. I'm the youngest. And it was just the pain of like being coddled that led me to being able to, like, all right, I'm going to do this on my own. I'm going to do this for myself. You know, I don't want your help. If I continue to accept your help, it's not going to make me any stronger. It's going to make me weaker.
I feel like you handle yourself with such grace. When you're saying this, I didn't expect it. Do you have like examples of that you could maybe share with the audience of how to do that with more grace, right? Instead of going hyper masculine and becoming an asshole.
Humility. It's a combination of humility and will, you know, like my motto this year is to mature quietly, to grow quietly. Like you don't need to be unmodest and showing yourself off and proving yourself to other people. Like you don't give a fuck what other people think, you know what I mean? And I've come to adopt that because I've been on the other end. I used to people please. I used to try and empath everyone and make sure my needs are met, because I can just so easily identify other people's emotions and make sure they're taken care of, and then I'm taken care of. And that doesn't end well. And so yeah, it's you don't have to be you need to be assertive, but you don't have to be loud about it. Like you can do what you need to do and no one has to know about it. And I think this is part of the American culture, is like, oh, we got the cameras rolling, you know, everyone's watching me. I want to be seen. I used to want that too. I think it's just the wisdom in it for me is just knowing that I can overcome my environment and I don't have to prove that to everyone.
Why is that important to you?
You have to be able to solve problems in life. Like if you're not a problem solver, you're not going to get very far, because life is usually a series of problems that get thrown at you, and you're just like, you have to adapt and rise to the occasion with those things. And it's hard, and that's the eustress that is important. Like you have to let yourself feel that. I also spent a lot of time just offloading those responsibilities to other people. And like I said, that doesn't make you any stronger. And like to me, it's important to have that inner strength, because if I can't meet my external experience with the strength that's needed to like rise above it, I think I have a natural inclination for growth and evolution. Like I feel like my life is a series of deaths and rebirths. And I just know that I'm going to constantly go through those, and then I'll allow myself to go through them, because I've learned that uncomfortability it yields fruit. You know, there's things that you get from allowing yourself to go through that type of shit.
I think that the most beautiful lessons or the most value is extracted from those times. With the topic of problem solving and when you actually are living life in a way that you're challenging yourself and pursuing interests and goals, and you're on a daily basis you're having to problem solve. Where did the interest in cacao, where did Cacao Breath come up, and what was the journey like there?
Yeah. Cacao was just a tool in the tool belt. It was one of the first plant medicines I was introduced to. It definitely has a heart opening effect and a creative enhancer. It gets your blood moving. It makes you happy. And so I just recognized that this is something that was such a big part of my initial awakening. And like, I knew that I could share that with the world, having such deep experiences with it, that I could package it up and share it with people. And what's unique, and I'll just talk about my product a little bit. What's unique about my cacao is it's called Maya Cacao. And so I actually got the idea from the shaman, from my teacher, Keith. He said that Maya nut is a supreme synergist with cacao because it's a very dense food. It's like, it's heavy. The seeds themselves you got to think of them like little rocks because there's so much calcium and magnesium content in them. So it provides a type of grounding base for the heart opening effects of cacao. And
Your product is the only one that has Maya nut in it, right?
Yeah, I believe that there's less than 10 Maya nut manufacturers in the world. So this is like an untapped, unknown superfood. And in a lot of ways, I feel like I'm just sitting on some gold, and it's like, it's just ahead of its time, or it just hasn't become well known yet, because it's good for the environment. It's drought resistant. These trees provide food for a lot of the ecosystem that surrounds them.
That's also in Guatemala.
Central America. It even grows in Florida.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely a cool tree.
Were you still pulling out a thread of getting study or scientific research with that?
No, not so much. I mean, we run tests, and like the polyphenol content is, it's up there with cacao, and cacao has a lot of polyphenols and antioxidants and stuff in it. So there's health benefits. It could become a food additive, a baking additive that would increase the nutrition of things like flour, white flour, all of these alternative flours. So if we started putting that in with these flour alternatives or gluten-free things, it would definitely enhance the nutrition.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's promising, but
where does your intuition, where is it guiding you? Like, there's so many different applications that we've talked about how long have we known each other? 2 years, a year?
2 years almost.
About 2 years. So over the last couple of years, we've talked about the different potentialities for the Maya nut.
It's kind of catching on as a coffee alternative.
Okay.
So there's that. Aside from that, I would, man, if it could get into, I mean, it's an untapped food source. Like, it's growing already. Like the stuff that I get, it's wild harvested, and it's taken care of. We do tests on it. We make sure there's not any like bad molds or things like this. And I just think that I don't know its potential. I think that's what excites me about it. I'm kind of in the flow with it, you know.
You're just open to anything.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of the background with the Maya Cacao.
Yeah.
You distribute online, right? So people can go to your website. What's your website?
Cacaobreath.com.
Cacaobreath.com. And you use that as to start every breath work.
Yeah. I serve it before breathwork class. a big part of a cacao ceremony for me is just educating about the history of cacao and the health benefits of it. Um, and of course, it's when I learned from the teacher that I studied with, um, a lot of what the ideologies or the beliefs that came with it extra, but like cacao itself is an amazing food. I mean, there's a reason why it's like one of the biggest industries in the world, and it can definitely be used as a health food, meaning like it's something you can eat every day. Yeah, so my teacher would call it the food for the shift. He believed that it was something that could help people align their consciousness or shift their consciousness. So like when I started really looking at it from more of a business perspective, I was like, all right, Cacao, what's the motto? Like if we had a tagline, what would it be? And what came to me was, Cacao is a plant medicine partner that can help us solve our planetary and personal issues by facilitating a shift in consciousness that is more heart-based. And so if you look at the mind is a great servant. You've heard that saying, it's like a bad master but a good servant.
Yep.
And that the electromagnetic field coming from our heart is like 50 times more powerful than the one from our brain. And so when your heart is open, you enter a field. Joe Dispenza would call this the quantum field, and you start to activate that more, and you have more of you essentially, another way I like to put it is like you become a creator instead of a consumer. And that's a big shift. And like being able to step into being more creative and creating art or projects or businesses or products is far more fulfilling than just like going to the store and buying things and using things and watching TV and etc.
So can you, for our listeners, what's the quantum realm? Can you explain that?
The quantum realm. This is fascinating. And I just want to be clear, because you are your own best teacher and guide. And I think when people get in touch with their inner compass or inner shaman, don't listen to me, and I'll say that the quantum realm is just like the unseen. I think it pertains a lot to what we would call, it involves spirituality, but it's like this web that connects everything. And I guess the idea that I've bought into is that your heart is the gateway to your soul, and that by just maybe setting a simple intention to listen to your soul, you can live a more aligned life. And it doesn't have to make sense to your rational mind. In fact, it probably won't. I was talking to a buddy of mine who we're making a new product together. He was like, everyone in life thinks that there's an end goal, and that getting on the wave to get back to shore to get to a shoreline is the goal. And he's like, there's no purpose to singing or dancing or running. It's like the purification of yourself through the activity. And so the concept is just like, you just got to learn to surf the wave. And it's when you're in that you could, in spiritual circles, they could call that non-doing or non-action, when you're just so in that flow state or whatever you want to call it, that it's, you're in alignment with what feels good to you. And I really think that life can be that simple. Like all this stuff that, like reading books and all this stuff is great, and information and memory is great. I wonder what the world would look like if people were just in touch with that flow state that exists within them, that comes through them, from them,
The consume versus create kind of mentality that you talk about, or way of being, is just, it's not even close. Like when you're consuming Netflix and TikTok and like all of these different things, and like consuming food and entertainment and all these things, versus when you're creating it. And I hope everybody gets to experience what the difference is between creating media or consuming media, creating products versus consuming products, creating brands versus consuming brands. Like if everyone could experience what it feels like to create something, or to take something, ethereal, or something from your mind, or from thought to reality, that little process of creation is like so fulfilling.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's you put like a piece of yourself out into the world, and then you get to see how, hopefully it has a beneficial impact on whoever. And it's very rewarding. In fact, the biggest reason I decided to do entrepreneurship, it wasn't so that I could share cacao with the world. It was so that I could grow, and so that I could I could expand my own evolutionary journey. And that to me that's number one, man.
It's so true.
Yeah.
So true. I always say business and entrepreneurship is one of the greatest catalysts to growth. Yeah. Business, or I'll just say entrepreneurship, relationship, and kids. Let's dive into that parenthood. Yeah. Being a bonus dad. That's one of those things that you and I have had many conversations over the last year and some months, or a couple of years. And I remember one time we were talking about raising kids and parenthood, and you said something, and I was like, hey, I don't have a dog in the fight when it comes to parenting bonus kids, or being a bonus dad.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? And
yeah.
I'm just, because the complexity, the nuance, there's just so much to that I'm like, I don't know what it would be like. So I don't really have anything to give you with that.
Yeah. I mean,
so to all those bonus dads out there,
it's first of all, I have some experience, but because of the situation that I'm in, I actually I'm not around my partner's kids that often. And it's interesting because I had divorced parents, and I had, my mom had misbeliefs about my dad that really affected me. And now I see that's exactly what's happening, just to a more extreme degree. And it's very sad. It's unfortunate with my partner's kids and her ex.
So speaking from your experience, what do you wish your mom wouldn't have done, or would have done better?
I wish she wouldn't have ever spoken about my dad. And she did. She said a lot of things about my dad that made me believe, and I was a kid, I couldn't think for myself back then. She said a lot of things that made me believe that he was a bad person. It wasn't true. My dad's a great guy. He's a great dude, as I've gotten to know him.
You guys are rekindling that relationship now, years later, right?
25, 26 years old. I'm like in a lot of ways, I just feel like I'm just getting to know my dad. Yeah. And so from my perspective, I'm like, to my partner, I'm like, yo, your kids probably aren't going to see you for who you are until their brain is fully developed. Yeah, it's sad. And we could talk about people with bad behavior and stuff, but like, and the way the judicial system can be a tool to help alienate kids from a parent who's really just trying to do good by them. It's so sad.
So for all the co-parents out there, right? All the bonus dads, bonus moms, it seems like the lesson that just from hearing what you've told me and a little bit on and off the podcast was treat the person that, even though you're not in a relationship with, you guys are raising this human together, right? You don't need to overly, praise somebody that you're no longer like in a relationship with, but you also don't need to demonize or tear that person down, because what you just said was, and now you're living real time through that, is that you're finding out who they really are on your own, which will happen regardless of how much you convince your children that this person doesn't care or is worthless. Or
love your kids enough to let them know that like they can form their own opinions about their parents, and that like my opinion about your dad is it doesn't mean anything. It's like you should have the right to think for yourself. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard. As for my personal stance with, because it's like, oh, should I try and be a extra dad to them? I'm like, I just want to position myself as like a cool uncle type person. It's like I get to be your friend, I get to hang out with you. It's like it's not my job to parent you. Like you have parents. So when I have been around them, I've just tried to be supportive and kind and like have fun. Really, I think that's one of the best things. I don't have my own kids, but like if I had kids, I would want to have fun with them because that's what kids are supposed to do. Kids are supposed to have fun, once they're like older and they start becoming a young adult, like maybe then you can work harder at like teaching them some things.
Yeah, I like that Einstein quote that says that the highest form of intelligence is play.
Mm-hmm.
So true.
Yeah.
So true. Yeah, parenthood is another one of those catalysts for growth for sure. Having kids.
I wanted to talk about being the extra dad and co-parenting rather than breath work.
Okay.
Because breath work and going to like breath work events is not real life. Like if you get into a relationship with someone and you have kids with them, like that's real life. That's a consequence you're going to deal with for the rest of your life. And if we're talking about spirituality, like learning to deal with your situation is more spiritual. Maybe breath work could help you cope and like bring you to these times of clarity. But in the situation I see my partner in, like you got to go to court. You got to come up with the money to go to court. You got to come up with the inner strength to fight in court if that's what your best thing is. And that's hard, bro. It's easy to go pay $50 and go to a breathwork class. Anyone can do that. Like,
yeah, so true, so real. And you're one of the few facilitators that will admit that, right? Because everyone wants to make a profit or have people come to their breathwork class, but it's just real. It's real. It's raw.
Yeah.
And I think that's why you and I have connected and stayed connected over the years. You may be transitioning into taking one-on-one clients, working, which I think is a natural evolution, right? Just getting more of a data point, becoming this more holistic person. What does that look like? What would your ideal client be for anyone listening that may be looking for somebody with your skill set?
My ideal client is someone they're committed to their own growth without any kind of fluff. Like they already know what real work is, and that it takes a level of perseverance and grit and will. It's not like these fluffy standards that are like the shit you see on Instagram. It's like, buy my e-course book and you'll It's like, what are you doing with your time throughout the day, and like how committed are you to, if you come to me and you're like, I want to get fit, it's like, okay, well, are you still like drinking soda? Are you still eating fast food every day? Because if you are, I'm not gonna work with you.
Seriously, yeah. Baseline, you still drinking? You still smoking?
Yeah. So people that are already on their health journey, people that are already on their at the beginning of their entrepreneurial path, and maybe they need some help like coaching or building a website or with like graphic design or just someone to hold them accountable. And life is like, it's what happens to you when you're not ready for it. Like I just got better. I just healed up from being sick for like a week and a half with the flu. I wouldn't feel good enough to really do anything. I mean, I tried and I pushed myself to do things, but sometimes you just, like, when you're sick like that, you just got to chill and rest. Like life has lessons to teach you. And if you're not receptive or humble enough to learn from what life has to show you, then I don't want to work with you.
All right, facts. Where can people find you?
Instagram is Cacao Breath. I have a Facebook. It's just my name, Nico Miyatake. Yeah.
Okay, Wolfpack, I appreciate you tuning in today. If you're watching this on YouTube, like and subscribe. If you are listening, go to the YouTube channel, like and subscribe. I've got a ton of content coming out this year, a lot of guests. We are double downing. My goal for this, for 2023, is to become the #1 men's development or self-development podcast in the world. And that is a big goal. So with that, I'm going to need a lot of you guys to start subscribing, because you're watching, but you're not subscribing. I think I have something like 80% of people that watch don't subscribe. So thanks again, man. For anyone that's listening or watching, we've had more technical difficulties on this episode than I've had the entire last 20 episodes that I've put out, like accumulatively more in one than the last 20. So thanks for bearing with me, Nico. Appreciate you taking the time out, and I hope you guys got some value today. Peace.